Hi there. It's unfortunate that our country was hit by 2 earthquakes causing significant damage. However, I want to let you know that I've been working on a video about an accounting system using Excel. And despite the challenges, I continue to work on it. If you find value in my content, please consider supporting me. Thank you. In this video, we will see how to generate journal entries from warehouse movements and cash receipts and payments. How to determine ending inventory with weighted average assumption to determine cost of goods sold. How to get general ledger from journal entries. How to get invoices from warehouse movements. And don't forget the trial balance and financial statements. It will be a long video, but you can consider it as a comprehensive tutorial like something brand new. As usual, no macro, no VBA. So let's begin. Let's start with Assumptions worksheet. In this sheet we have company name, fiscal year begin date, fiscal year end date. Period can be year or quarter or so on. Report date. I can put any date I want. And I have here financial statements and their components. Balance sheet contains assets, liabilities, and equity. Income statement contains revenues and expenses. Assets contains current assets, long-term investments, property, plant and equipment, intangible assets, other assets. You can change any one you want. Liabilities contain current liabilities, long-term debt. Equity contains paid in capital and retained earnings. Revenues contain sale revenues and other revenues and gains. Expenses, cost of goods sold, selling expenses, administrative expenses, other expenses and losses, income tax. These lists I will define them as names to use them in formulas and data validation. Select D1, D4 range. Formulas tab. Create from selection. Just select top row. OK. To repeat the same step, select E1, E3 range. Then press F4 key. I will do that for all lists I have here. Press Manage Name from Formulas tab. I will see that I have 7 names for 7 lists I have in Worksheet. Here I have a trial balance which contains accounts and their opening balances. I want to transfer them to the chart of accounts sheet that I want to create. How can I do that to look like this? At first, I want the ending inventory for the income statement under cost of goods sold and for balance sheet as current assets. Then I will put the other accounts that are balance sheet or income statement components. Create a new sheet and rename it Chart of Accounts. In this sheet we should define Chart of Accounts, Personal Accounts and Inventories items. Let me start with Chart of Accounts. Here I want center across selection. Make some formatting. The first and second fields are for ending inventory to determine ending inventory balance for the balance sheet and the income statement. It's better to me to wrap text for the titles, center and middle alignment. I will create a table for more flexibility. Select the range. Format as table from Home tab in the ribbon. My table has headers. Here I want auto serial numbers. To make auto serial numbers, I will use row function. Equals row minus 3. Delete the second value, then fill series down. This table name is Table 1. We can change it if you want. After selecting the table, go to the Table Design tab. Type under the table name the name you want. I will give it this name. Press Enter. After that, I will define the accounts. If I define any account here, I will get auto serial numbers. Now I have the accounts I want. It's better to make data validation to input the correct values. As we know here, we have an income statement or a balance sheet. So I'll select this range. Data tab, Data Validation, List, select balance sheet and income statement range. OK. Here, if we have balance sheet, we want assets, liabilities and equity. And if we have income statement, we want revenues and expenses. I made a video about dependent list. Now we can talk about this shortly. Balance sheet here has a space between balance and sheet. As a name, we have underscore between balance and sheet. For that, I will replace space with underscore with substitute function. Equals substitute. The text is this cell. I don't want this, I want C6. So clear that because I want all column. The alt text is space between two quotations. The new text is underscore between two quotations. We have here the balance sheet. Precede the formula with indirect. OK. Because we have a table here, so we have some problem. Let me copy this formula and paste here. I can see assets, liabilities and equity. For all columns, we want C1, C2, C3, etc. Even though there is an error, the formula will work properly in data validation. Let me select the formula and copy it. Select column D, Data Validation, List, paste the formula in the source here, but replace C6 with C1. And press OK. As we see, cash is an asset. Beginning inventory is expense under cost of goods sold. In the same way, under assets, I want current assets, long-term investments, etc. Equals indirect. D5. This is a list I want. Copy the formula. Select all columns. Data validation. List. Paste the formula. Replace D5 with D1. OK. The list will change depending on this cell content. After defining all accounts, the table will look like this. Don't worry about balances, we will get them later automatically. As we know, some accounts include personal accounts. For example, accounts receivable may include more than personal accounts. Here I have one, which is John Hughes. The same for accounts payable. Here we have one, which is Lennon Jones. On the other hand, the beginning inventories include multi-items in the commercial entities. In our example, we have pens and pencils with their quantity and price per unit. I have to define them in my system to use them in it. Like the chart of accounts, I can select Center Across selection for this range. Wrap text for the titles. To ensure that the user will input the correct account in account name, we must use data validation. In fact, the most accounts may include personal accounts. For that, I want the list to be all accounts except the ending inventory. For that, I want to define name using offset function to get dynamic range for all accounts with exception of ending inventory. Let me type here equals offset. The reference is B4 with absolute reference. The rows are 2. No columns needed. The height is count A. Column B with absolute reference. Here I have 3 additional zeros. To remove them, subtract 3 from count A function. Select the formula and copy it. Formulas tab. Define name. Let me type my accounts without spaces in the name. Paste the formula here. Now I have a dynamic name. Select column J, Data tab, Data validation, List. Press F3 to view the names. Select my account's name. After finishing, format this range as a table. And don't forget the auto serial numbers with row function. Select Override all cells in this column with formula. Here I have error. To remove it, select Titles and select Data Validation and select any value. Don't forget to rename the table if you want. Here I finished the personal accounts, but what about items? If you want to create items groups and serial codes and more information, you can create a worksheet for items definition. But here I will create an items table in this sheet because I will put only basic information. I will use here the weighted average cost assumption to determine ending inventory and cost of goods sold. If you want FIFO or LIFO assumptions, I explained them in another video. You can see it in the description. Here I have 3 tables, but only one I will format it as a table, while the others will remain as ranges to easy build formulas. The first table contains auto serial numbers and items names. The second is for quantity. You will see the quantity of beginning inventory, purchases, sales, and ending inventory. Almost the same data in the price in the third table. All data here will be calculated automatically. To make a file work properly, I have defined purchases, sales, and beginning inventory in the chart of accounts. At the end, don't forget to rename the table of items if you want. I want a link to the first empty row in each table to make it easier to enter data. To do that, I will use hyperlink function. The reference I want here is B16, preceded by hashtag. The friendly name is the text I want to be displayed in the cell. Here I can type chart of accounts. As you know, the 16 is variable depending on accounts count. Let me try count A function. Equals count A. Column B. The result is 13. Just add 3 to get 16. Copy this formula without equals and replace 16 with the formula. Copy the formula and paste it in C1. I will do the same for D1 and E1. We can create a link to assumptions sheet. Select this cell, Ctrl+K, place in this document, select Assumptions Sheet. In Assumptions Sheet, I will create links to all sheets I have in this workbook. Simply, I will divide sheets to data entry sheets and reports sheets. In the same way, I will create a link to chart of accounts sheet. At the end, apply freeze spans to freeze the titles. I have here trial balance contains accounts and their opening balances. If I want to journalize them as opening entry, debit, cash, beginning inventory, equipment, supplies, accounts receivable, credit, capital, notes payable, accounts payable. The description is opening balance and the date is January 1st, 2023. If I want to record them in Excel, I must have a journal entries sheet. I select this form. I have here auto serial numbers, date, amount, debit account, credit account, and explanation. I can't use compound journal entries here, so I will divide it into simple ones. The capital will be corresponding account for all accounts. The first account is cash. The serial number will be added automatically. The date is January 1st. The amount is 83,000. The debit account is cash and the credit is capital. The explanation is opening balance. I can't make a journal entry for the beginning inventory. I will add it in warehouse movements sheet. Here I have equipment. It's the debit and capital is the credit. The same for supplies. Accounts receivables can be added here because I will add them in cash payments sheet as personal accounts. Notes payable is credit and capital is debit. Accounts payable are as accounts receivable. As you see, this is the journal entries sheet. To make a link to assumptions sheet, copy this cell that contains wanted link and paste it here. Here I added a link as I explained before. Don't forget to format this range as a table. As we did before, use row function for auto serial numbers. Data validation for debit and credit accounts because I want here all accounts except ending inventories. Data tab, data validation, list, press F3 to display all names, select my accounts. At the end, I will rename the table. Here I have a personal account which is John Hughes as accounts receivable. To record its opening balance, I consider that I have paid him this amount through the capital. This sheet represents cash payments and receipts. I will record the date, the personal account, the amount. I must tell Excel if this transaction is cash receipts or cash payments. Here it's payments. The cash account is capital here because this is an opening balance. In the explanation, just type opening balance. The same for accounts payable, but the difference here is the transaction considered as receipts. This is the cash receipts and payments sheet. After entering the first transaction, I will format this range as a table. Here I want data validation. I must define a new name which refers to personal accounts in the chart of accounts sheet. Personal accounts are a part of this table. I can't use table reference in data validation. Let me type in this cell equals these cells. It gives me the wanted values. If I turn back to the cell, I will see the table reference. Let me enclose the reference in quotation marks. Then precede the formula with indirect function to define this formula as a name. Copy this formula. Go to the Formulas tab, define name. Type personal accounts without spaces in the name field. And paste the formula in refers to field. In Cash Payments worksheet, select C2 if you didn't, Data tab, Data Validation, List. Press F3 to view the names. Select Personal Accounts. Let me continue entering data. In this column also I want data validation because I want only receipts or payments. Data tab, Data Validation, List. Type in the source receipts, payments. Also here we want data validation. I define a name which refers to all accounts with expectation of ending inventory. I will choose it. Ctrl+apostrophe to copy a value from the cell above the active cell. As we did before, fill auto serial numbers with row function. The inventory also, I must enter them in a separate worksheet. This sheet is the warehouse movement. As beginning inventory, I will make them debit while capital account will be credit. I will input pen as an item. The invoice is beginning inventory. The quantity is 500. The price is 10. And the personal account will be capital. I have to define it in personal accounts. After creating the warehouse movement worksheet and converting this range to a table, I designed it like this. Here we have auto serial numbers as usual, using row function. Choose override all cells in this column with this formula, or fill series down. Then date. The invoice number must be just a number. It's very important because I will use it later in my file. I will use data validation. Here select the whole number. In data select greater than. Type here 0. Now I must input only numbers that are greater than 0. For items also I want data validation. I will use a name like I did before. Use indirect function with items names. Copy this formula. Go to the Formulas tab, Define Name. I will choose Item as a name. Paste the formula. Turn to Warehouse Movements Worksheet. Select the item name in the list source. The invoice must be beginning inventory, purchases, or sales, so I will use also data validation. Just type in the source beginning inventory, purchases, and sales. For the total, simply it's the price multiplied by the quantity. Choose Override all cells in this column with this formula, or fill series down. For the personal account, I must use data validation. I did that before. Choose personal account's name. But here I want a capital account, so I have to define it in the chart of accounts sheet as personal account. At the end, I want the total for each invoice to use it in my reports. To calculate a total, I can use SUMIF or SUMIFs function. I will use SUMIFs equals SUMIFs. Sum range is total. Criteria range 1 is invoice number. Criteria 1 is C2 cell. Choose Override all cells in this column with this formula, or fill series down. Before we go to the reports, I will review some transactions and see how to journalize them in our system. On January 3rd, pays $10,000 of notes payable. Here the entry is debit, notes payable, credit, cash. In our file, we can input it in cash payments sheet, but we must define personal account under notes payable. But here I will input them in the journal entries sheet as any entry. After typing the date and the amount, choose notes payable in the debit account, then choose cash in the credit. Don't forget the explanation. We can type paid notes payable cash. On January 3rd, the owner gets 200 pence at $20 per item. The invoice number is 2. Here the entry is debit drawing, credit sales. Since we have sales, we must input these data in warehouse movement sheet. But before, I must define personal account for the owner under drawing account. Let me define my name as an owner. The financial account is drawing. I must define it in the chart of accounts. Turn back to warehouse movements sheet. The invoice number is 2. Type PIN under the item. The invoice is sales. The quantity is 200 with $20 per unit. The explanation is the owner gets pence on account. The personal account is Ahmad Nasser. On January 4th, purchases 400 pence cash from Lennon Jones for $13 per item. The invoice number is 3. The journal entry is debit purchases, credit cash. In our file in warehouse movement sheet, I will input the data. Type the date, then the invoice number. Under items, type PIN. Press Tab key to autocomplete. The invoice here is purchases. The quantity is 400 multiplied by $13. The explanation is purchases pence cash. Since the invoice is cash and the cash is not a personal account, I have to define it as a personal under the cash account. On January 8, purchases 300 pence from Lennon Jones for 14 per item and pays $1,000 cash and the residual on account. The invoice number is 4. Here we have a combined entry. It's debit purchases $4,200, credit cash $1,000, and accounts payable Lennon Jones $3,200. In our system, we can't input combined entry. We will divide the transaction into two ones. The first is a credit purchase for the whole amount. Then we will record cash payment to the vendor in the cash payments worksheet. Let's start with the purchases in the warehouse movement worksheet. Type the date and the invoice number. Under items, type in. The invoice here is purchases. The quantity is 300 multiplied by $14. The explanation is purchases pence, cash, and on account. The personal account is Lennon Jones. Now go to cash payments worksheet. Enter the same date. The personal account is Lennon Jones. The amount is $1,000. Choose payments. The cash account here is cash. We want the same explanation. Purchases pence, cash, and on account. On January 9th, sells 500 pence for $20 per item and 100 pencil for $30 per item to John Hughes on account. The invoice number is 5. Here the entry is debit account receivable, John Hughes, credit sales. In our file, go to warehouse movement. Type the date and the invoice number. Under items, type in. The invoice here is sales. The quantity is 500 multiplied by $20. The explanation is sales on account. The personal account here is John Hughes. Repeat the same steps for pencil with the same invoice number. On January 13, pays $400 for January rent. The entry is debit rent expense, credit cash. I will use the journal entries sheet after defining the rent expense in the chart of accounts worksheet. I will speed up the video. If you want to follow me and the speed is not suitable, please pause the video. On January 15th, received $1,000 from John Hughes on account. The entry is debit cash, credit accounts receivable, John Hughes. Here I will input this entry in the cash payments sheet. On January 18th, pays $800 to Lennon Jones on account. The entry is debit accounts payable, Lennon Jones, credit cash. Also, I will input the entry in the cash payments sheet. I want to unify the data so that I can put it all in one range. Journal entries, cash payments, and warehouse movement will be posted to a new sheet to extract auto-journal entries that will be used to get all financial reports. Let me see how. At the beginning, let me create 3 dynamic ranges that exactly match my journal entries table. These ranges I will create them from the 3 input worksheet, which are journal entries, cash payments, and warehouse movements. I will start with journal entries worksheet. I can start here, then I will move this range to O1 cell in all 3 worksheets to standardize them. Copy titles, paste values. Type here equals. Serial numbers for journal entries table. Filters to the right. Fill without formatting. Ctrl+X to cut. Paste in K1 cell. Copy the titles again for cash payments worksheet. Let me paste the values here. Type here equals. Serial numbers from cash payments table. Filters to the right. Fill without formatting. The data needs to be rearranged. The date column is in its proper place. Let me move this data to the right to rearrange it. Move the amount to the proper place. The explanation also. I must arrange debit and credit accounts depending on the transaction if it's considered as receipts or payment. So if the transaction is payment, the debit account is the personal account, while the credit is the cash account, and vice versa. Here I will use the if function, equals if. If the transaction is payments, the debit account is the personal account, else the cash account. Copy the formula then, paste it here. Replace payments with receipts. The data are ready now. Cut this range. Paste it in O1 cell. Delete unwanted data. I think I misplaced the data in the journal entries worksheet. Let me turn back to move them to O1 cell. Copy the titles again for warehouse movements worksheet. Let me paste then the values here. Here I have some differences. The data here will depend on invoice number instead of serial numbers. To get the unique invoice numbers, use unique function, equals unique. The invoice number on the warehouse table. To find the date for each invoice, use XLOOKUP function. Lookup value is A14 to A18 range. The hashtag indicates that the range is dynamic. Lookup array is invoice number in warehouse table. Return array is the date. I can't fill series to the right because in tables there is no absolute reference, and here I need absolute reference for invoice number. To make it absolute, I can use indirect function with the reference as I did before for names. Press F4 to make A14 absolute. Now I can fill series to the right. Fill without formatting. Let me move this data to the right to rearrange it. Delete unnecessary data. Move the explanation to the proper place. The amount also. Here the debit and credit depend on sales invoices. If invoice which is in I-14 is sales, the debit account is personal account which is in J-14, else it's the invoice which is in I-14. Select the formula and copy it. Paste it here. Replace equals sales with unequals sales. I get the credit account. Don't forget that the hashtag indicates that the range is dynamic. I want to delete these cells, so I must replace them with their formulas with find and replace. Copy the formula in I-14 without equals. Find and select from the Home tab. Type in find what, I-14 hashtag. In replace with, paste the formula, replace all. Again, copy the formula in J-14 without equals. Type in find what, J-14 hashtag. In replace with, paste the formula, replace all. Cut the range, paste it in O1. Delete unnecessary data. Now I want a new sheet to consolidate all entries for all three sheets. But here we have duplicate numbers between worksheets. I can avoid that if I add to serial numbers in a sheet the max number from the subsequent sheet. In Cash Payments worksheet, add to row function max invoice numbers. In Journal Entries worksheet, add max serial numbers of cash payments. Now, add a new worksheet. Move it to the end. Rename it Auto Journal Entries. Copy the titles from Journal Entries worksheet. Use VStack function to combine the three ranges. Equals VStack. O2 from Journal Entries sheet. Then O2 from Cash Payments sheet. Then O2 from Warehouse Movement sheet. Filters to the right. Apply the suitable format for each column. I will see here that the data is not arranged by date. I have to arrange it. And I will convert these entries from the form that I used in my old accounting system, that the debit account will be a negative number and the credit account will be a positive number. We will see how to do that in part 2.